Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicole Lentine. It's Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. Today in the show, I'm speaking with Mark Heiman, Senior Web Application Developer at Carleton College, about his HighEdWeb Red Stapler Best in Track winning presentation, Let's Face It, We're Not 16 Anymore, and its insight that it can provide in the admissions field. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts which are always free and accessible to you in the archives at higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Be a part of our broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. You can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter, for which I'm tweeting out a link momentarily. Today's show would not be possible without the support of Carleton College and M. Stoner. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Abilene Christian University. Face it, from the very beginning of your career, you've never had that professional stamp that says you're an expert in enrollment management. Well, now you have that opportunity. Abilene Christian University's new graduate certificate in enrollment management provides 4 highly interactive online courses that can be completed in as little as 10 months. Combined with a unique residency component, the program is designed to help enrollment management professionals expand their knowledge and give them a credential to set themselves apart in the field. Visit acu.edu/enrollment management to learn more. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Chegg Enrollment Solutions. Chegg Enrollment Services connects the nearly 80% of college-bound students researching schools across the web with the colleges and universities who are trying to reach them. Using an online platform that includes over 10 of the most popular college search sites online, Chegg can help you save over 90% on the cost of traditional methods for generating your inquiry pool. Email outreach@chegg.com to schedule a free consultation. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Welcome to College. Welcome to College helps higher ed institutions optimize the highest leverage decision point, the college visit. Looking for ways to optimize your college visit program? In a few weeks, Welcome to College will release version 2.0 of its web platform. Contact Welcome to College to learn how to claim your school's page and take advantage of many new features. And we are tweeting out links to all of those sponsors momentarily. So to get started into our show, I'm very excited to welcome Mark onto this show. His session was featured in the Usability, Accessibility, and Design track at the conference, and as I mentioned, won Best in Track, which is very exciting. And while it's focused more on kind of the website of things, I found that there are a lot of takeaways to bring into the admissions world. So I'm very excited to welcome Mark on here. Mark, do you mind introducing yourself with a little bit of your kind of background and history in higher ed?
Absolutely. I've been working in higher ed since 1992, and actually started out as a technical writer. So my background is in communication, but I was that guy for a long time when the web came around, and I was the one who was sitting in the chair that somebody thought should figure out this web thing and what's it good for and what can we do with it. So I built the first web pages for Carleton College, and so I've done a little bit of everything over the years, writing and design and technical work and systems work and user support, but as the web has grown and become more complex and we needed more resources, the web team at Carleton has grown to a number of people, and so I focused more on the programming development side of things, so I still do a little bit of other pieces as well, but I try to bring forward that background with communications and user support to really think about how the development that we're doing can be most effective and most usable for our audiences.
Excellent, and it sounds nice. It sounds like you've worn a few hats, which definitely must help you to be able to think with that kind of, mind when you're reviewing the work that you're doing.
I'm all about big picture. It's important not to get too narrowly focused on any one aspect of the technology or the particular messages. If you can really think about the big picture, we can accomplish a lot more.
Absolutely. Well, I want to dive right into a quote that you had in your presentation that really, really resonated with me, particularly, of course, because I'm in the admissions field, and so it caught my eye. But a lot of people tweeted and retweeted this. Every public page, excuse me, on your site is an admissions page. So can you get a little bit deeper into what this means to you? And I'll kind of tap into some more admissions-related questions after that. But what does that really mean to you?
Absolutely. It's hard for me to say, too, every public page. I think it's a recognition that prospective students are coming to higher ed websites really from anywhere and everywhere. You know, they're not just landing on the home page. They're not just landing on the admissions page. They're typing into Google something like your institution name and chemistry, and they're going directly to the area of the site that they're particularly interested in. Eventually, they do make it back to your homepage. They do make it back to your admissions page. But in many cases, the first impression they have of your school is wherever they happen to land. And so, you know, we can look at our stats and see how many students are ending up at the admission site or ending up at the homepage, having first come from somewhere else. And we can see it's a pretty huge number. So, I think it's critical to recognize that from an admissions standpoint, when we're thinking about the impression that we're giving to students, when we're thinking about the messages that we're trying to convey, that we can't just limit it to the home page. We can't just limit it to the admissions site, because that's not necessarily where they're starting. At Carleton, we actually spent some time working with our academic departments and our dean to try to think through some of these issues, because we knew that the prospective students were landing on those academic pages. And so we really built out some standards and required each of the academic departments to have a section on their site that was dedicated to prospective students, so that when they did land there from their Google search, there was something there for them that they knew was intended for them, and direct them to the admission site for further information. But give them a little bit of taste right there where they landed.
Excellent. I love that you've really made sure to bring more and more people into it to really think in that way. And it makes me kind of wonder too, in my role as an admission counselor, I wonder what do you believe is most important for me to understand about our site, that when I go out on there on the road and I'm talking to students, and if I direct them to the web page, I mean, obviously that layer of things that they're not always going to go through the home page, but what should I know maybe about the architecture of the site or the structure of the site that would help me as an admission counselor to kind of do my job well and make sure it's working well with what the web's doing?
Oh, well, clearly you've got to know where things are. If you're trying to answer questions, you can't predict what kind of questions you're going to be getting. Hopefully your site has good search on it, so that you can quickly find answers to questions that students are asking you. In many ways, I think it's a great opportunity if you're on the road and you're sitting with a student and you've got the website pulled up and they're asking questions. That's a wonderful opportunity to be looking at your site through their eyes and thinking about what would I be seeing, or what would they be thinking if they were visiting the site right now with me? Maybe they are. Maybe they're looking over your shoulder, and is what I'm seeing on the page actually addressing them? Is it appropriate to them? Is it not misleading to them? So I don't know that there's anything particular about the architecture of the site other than just being able to find things, but I think that on-the-road opportunity is a great way to experience thinking about what's it like to be that student exploring that web page for the first time.
I like that idea of walking through it with them, because I think it touches upon one of the biggest things that seemed to be a takeaway from your presentation is, you had said that 16 through 18-year-olds are measurably cognitively different in the way they interact with web pages, and asking different questions and potentially not get the answers you expect them to get. So what should we know about, the way our admissions page is set up, and, what are, I guess, bigger takeaways that you think are valuable that you learned in that experience that maybe we should be thinking about, I guess?
Sure. Well, just to recap a little bit of what I covered in the presentation, we did some focus groups with high school students. We were looking specifically at juniors and seniors. We'd had a survey company select some students that were completely cold to us. They didn't know about us, and they didn't know who we were. So we were able to show them a number of higher ed homepages to get their impressions. The background of the whole project was that we were in the process of redesigning our homepage at the time, and so we wanted to get a sense of what is it that prospective students are interested in, what do they like about homepages, what do they dislike, how can we really tailor the design of our new site to make it most appealing and most informative to prospective students. We really saw as the core audience for that homepage. And what we found when we presented them with these pages, just kind of up on a screen cold, and we asked them to talk about what they thought about it, what they were seeing, what kind of impressions they were forming of the schools based on those pages, we were just shocked by the reactions and the comments that we were getting from them, because it was very clear that they were not interpreting the content on those pages in the way that we or the people who had designed those pages had intended them to be interpreting them. It was very common for the prospective students to look at a page and really instantaneously grasp all of the elements on that page. They're highly skilled at quickly absorbing everything that's on a page and taking it in and parsing it and drawing conclusions. But what they're not good at is drawing the correct conclusions from the things that they see. So what we were finding was that they would look at a homepage that has a big picture of some students sitting around in a backstage of a theater or something, and they'd immediately jump to the conclusion that this must be a theater school or an arts school. They'd look at other pictures of students doing something, or alumni out in the field somewhere, and they draw immediate conclusions that, again, that these photos strongly represented what the school was all about. And this was baffling to us until we started to think about and realized that the kinds of experiences that these students are used to having on the web are very direct. They're very targeted. The messages are very clear. If you go to the Apple website or you go to the Nike website, when you get there, you see big pictures of shoes or computers, and there's no ambiguity about what it is that's being sold. Whereas when you come to a higher ed site, it's often really hard to puzzle out what is it exactly that they're trying to tell us. What is the message here? What is being sold? And, some people take issue with the notion that we're selling something in higher ed, but we're certainly marketing. We're certainly trying to convey some messages. We're trying to make a conversion and turn someone from a prospect into somebody who has engaged with us and potentially could become a student. So it's a marketing endeavor, but we're really bad about being focused on those messages and providing imagery that supplements those messages in extremely clear ways. And, so I wondered, after we'd done this research, why it was perhaps that the students were so bad at these kinds of tasks in figuring out what it is they were seeing on the page. One of them, obviously, I think, is this notion that they've got a lot of experience with other kinds of sites. But I did some digging and started doing some reading about what's different about adolescents. There's checking out the research on what's different about how adolescents work with the web. There's some great research from the Nielsen-Norman group about how teenagers use the web. There's other research that's compared how teenagers can accomplish tasks online compared to adults. The interesting takeaway about that is that teenagers are not nearly as savvy about doing things on the web as we think they are. Those of us who are getting gray imagine that the teenagers must be so much better than we are at using the web, but the research shows it's not true. They are measurably worse at completing tasks online than most adults. And so what's going on here in their heads, what makes them different? And so I quickly found that there's a lot of research about how adolescents' cognitive development, especially the prefrontal cortex development, which affects how they can problem solve, how they can have empathy and place themselves in other people's shoes and think about, be able to draw the conclusions about what somebody is trying to convey to them when it's not being conveyed in a very clear way. Because of where they are developmentally, they're just not very good at those kinds of tasks. And yet, so many of our homepages are based around the notion that we're going to present you with a whole lot of different information about our school. We're going to show you lots of pictures that represent different facets of the experience of being at our school. We're going to have news stories that suggest things about the quality of our academics or the quality of our faculty. So we've got all of these different elements on the pages, and we're kind of expecting somebody who lands on that page to be able to piece all that stuff together and get the message that we're trying to convey. And that's perfectly fine if our audience is adults, because they can do that kind of cognitive task. But adolescents are not well suited to drawing those kinds of conclusions from that kind of disparate data. Some of them could do it well, some of them are really bad at it. And that's what we were seeing in our focus groups, is that the students would look at this information, they would again, they'd take it all in, they didn't miss anything. But they would then draw really erroneous conclusions from what they saw, because they weren't able to make that extra step and say, okay, I've got these pieces of information, and if I assemble them in the right way, I can get this particular message. They don't bother to do that step. They immediately jump to conclusions based on what they're seeing. So if there's 2 news articles on your homepage about medical stories, they're going to jump to the conclusion that you're all about medicine. You may be a medical school, or that's one of your prime things. Because again, what they're used to seeing on a homepage is the core message. They're used to seeing this is the thing that this institution represents, and so that's what they go for, and that's the assumption they make.
Absolutely.
I'm rambling. I've forgotten your question already.
No, it's great, and you hit a lot of really valuable information. And actually, in looking through some of your sample images, I found there was one that was so fascinating. Actually, 2 that really stuck with me. One is that it's just a group of students sitting in chairs, and just based off of the fact that they were traditional fold-open chairs, they thought, oh, this school doesn't have a lot of money, or I forget exactly what they drew from that. But yeah.
Look at those chairs. They must not have much money, because they were just really ugly-looking metal chairs. It's not something you'd expect.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other one that I think rings true for so many colleges was that having the Donate Now button on the front page, immediately screams out to a student that, oh, well, they can't be doing well financially if they're asking for donations, because
that was a profound insight, and we were just completely thrown by that. Again, until we start to think about it. Mm-hmm. You're 16 years old. Your only experience with websites that have a Give Now button on them is maybe a charity or a Kickstarter or some other organization that needs your money, that doesn't have the resources it currently needs, and so it's got to ask for money. And so they take that experience and they apply it to our sites when they see these big Give Now or Support Us buttons. They think, what, does this school not have enough resources? Are they needy? And it's a perfectly reasonable conclusion, but it doesn't occur to us as adults, because we understand how higher ed funding works. We understand that that's part of our funding model, but there's absolutely no reason that the teenagers should have any idea how that works, and so they naturally draw the wrong conclusions.
Absolutely. I thought you made a... Oh, sorry.
Oh, and I think that's one of the key things that I think is important for admissions folks to be thinking about, mm-hmm. is that, I think it's been clear to all of us for a long time that it's important to make sure that you've got messages on your website, both on your homepage and your admission site, that are very clear and very focused towards this audience. But the thing that we haven't thought about is the fact that it's possible there are things on those pages that are misleading, that are giving them messages that we don't expect them to give, but they're giving them messages that are wrong. And so I think that's the really powerful insight, is to be able to look at your pages and think about, are there things here that if I'm 16 and I don't have any context in higher ed, and I'm jumping quickly to conclusions that I would misconstrue, that I would draw conclusions that simply aren't true. And it's a very different way to look at the pages and think about what's there. But I think when we do that, it allows us to really begin to pare that down and to pull away or to reframe some of those things that could be misleading, that we just, we're kind of blind to them because we know what they're about, we know who they're for, and it doesn't occur to us that somebody who's completely fresh to this whole experience might not understand.
Mm-hmm. No, it's an absolutely true point, and I have another question I want to jump into after this, but first I had a question to you, because you had mentioned that you, before redoing the news site, you had done some work with the admissions page specifically, right? Mm-hmm. That's right. And so you had some research based on that too, which I know is a different group, and maybe I think it was only representing one high school, but were there any meaningful insights about the admissions page specifically that you think, admission counselors that kind of stuck out as maybe things that admissions wasn't expressing clearly enough that maybe might resonate true for some other admissions offices out there?
Right. Well, again, a lot of the same kinds of ideas about being extraordinarily clear, not making assumptions about what the students understand and what they know, being really careful to try to really hold their hands through the process, in what we're trying to explain to them, in making the whole process of admissions extremely clear. You know, we've all got students who have a wide range of backgrounds. Many, you know, first-generation college students whose parents have no idea how this process works. So, you know, we saw again and again the importance of being extraordinarily clear and upfront, and not making any assumptions at all about what they know, because there's always going to be somebody out there who doesn't know that thing that you think is completely obvious. And so, keeping it simple, keeping it clear. Out of that early work, really I think one of the most important insights we got, and this is something that we saw again in this later research, was about the kinds of images that prospective students find appealing. And again, we had done similar work where we'd shown them pages from a number of institutions and engaged their reactions and gotten them to talk about what it is that they liked and didn't like. And what we found across the board is that when we showed them pictures of students, kind of close-cropped pictures of a single student or a couple students doing stuff, you know, or students engaged in, you know, some kind of a artistic or a theatrical, you know, basically any kind of a context that framed students, so you really didn't have a sense of the big picture of sort of where they were and what they were doing in space. That the high school students just, it turned them off. They didn't respond well to them. In many cases, they were very negative towards those images, and the reason that they gave is that they said they didn't know whether to trust them or not. So if there's a couple of smiling students standing on a sidewalk talking to each other, the high school students immediately jumped to the conclusion that this must be staged. It was entirely possible that those kids were models, that they didn't even necessarily go to that school. And a lot of the photos were cropped in such a way that you couldn't even see what school they were at. So who knows, they might have just been something you got out of a clip art collection. And the high school students were really savvy about that. Mm-hmm. And so what they wanted to see were pictures that gave them a much broader sense of what the campus experience was like. And so they loved landscape photos. They loved those big sweeping expanses with the ivy-covered buildings and lots of trees and grass and lakes and water. You know, those beautiful landscapes that we think are boring and not that interesting were the kinds of things that the high school students really responded to. And so, trying to dig into that with them in conversation, I really took away the notion that for students at that age thinking about going to college, they're really concerned about what is this place like, and what are the people there like. And is this a place I'm gonna be able to fit in? And they're looking for imagery that allows them to really place themselves into that picture. If you've got something really tightly cropped and there's not much context to it, there's no place for them in that photo. So if you can look at a photo and think about, is this a picture I can put myself in? Can I step into that photo and imagine what it's like to look around and see what's in that space? That's the experience they're looking for. And it makes perfect sense. If you think about, you know, you're traveling away from home and going someplace completely new, you really want to know what it's like to be there. What's it going to be? I'm going to spend 4 years in this place. I want to know before I go there, what's the experience going to be? I think that's why, I mean, admissions folks know that the campus tour is absolutely critical to the admissions experience, and that we know if we get the kids on campus for the tour, the likelihood of them coming is huge. And I think we see the same thing with our websites. And if there's any way that we can carry some of those experiences that they get on a campus tour into the website experience, and I think the way we do that is through really good photography, providing ways for them to explore the campus and to interact with students somehow, you know, in that online context. We can't do it as well as in person, but we can try to replicate some of those experiences. And so I think it makes a lot of sense when we think about what we know from admissions in terms of the power of the campus tour and the campus experience. You know, can we do that online? We can do some of it, and the closer we can get to that, I think the better we do.
Yeah, that's you're making me think just about what that experience is when a student comes to visit, and what sets that apart from just seeing these closely cropped images. And it's true, it's because you can see the whole picture. You can look around and see the students who are working out in the fitness center and the students that are sitting together having lunch together. And if it can be hard to, if you only are seeing these one or two images and they're not things that resonate with you, like you said, then you're not going to be able to insert yourself into that experience. And I never really thought about it that way. And that's so insightful. And it kind of makes me wonder, and you started to touch upon it too, of really, the admissions role sort of in this, because I think what's really occurred to me over the last year in my experiences, especially starting to do some work in the social media field, is the real important relationship between admissions and web, and really getting to know sort of what work we can do to help provide answers and help invaluable information to our prospective students. And so, the work that you're doing is so important, and I think you gave some really great insight as to how to, update those pages and everything. I know it's hard to say because you've been in that web world for longer than, and I've been in this admissions world, but what do you see as the importance of what admissions is doing that we can sort of bring in these stories and conversations that can supplement what students have already learned on our web? Is that too broad a question?
No, it's good. And I think it's about those stories. We've been fortunate at Carleton College that we've got a really great relationship between our web team and our admissions folks. We work together a lot on things. And I think we, from the website, we really rely on our admissions colleagues to be the ones who are out there and talking to the students, and they understand what the concerns are, they understand what the questions are, and they've got those stories about what it is that made this one student decide to choose us over another school, or vice versa. What the stories about the students who didn't come, and that's a rich vein of information. From a web perspective, because if we can have those stories and think about what they mean and begin to generalize, some of the things I was saying earlier about understanding how the campus visit experience affects students, and actually hearing stories about real students going through that and what they say as a result. We all do interviews afterwards, after campus tours, and then we do surveys and stuff, and being able to get that post-experience survey information to your web folks for them to think about, are there things here that are working or not working in our on-campus experience that we can apply to our online experience. So we really need you, because you're on the front lines and you've got the stories and you're in touch with the students, and you can bring those stories back to us and work with us to synthesize them and figure out what does it mean. Are there new trends that we're seeing about what students are interested in, or is it, are we really seeing the same things that we saw years ago? And the longer I spend in this, the more I feel like we talk about the millennial generation and all the rest of this stuff and how different kids are, and I realize that it's not really all that different than it was 20 years ago. They still care about the same stuff when it comes right down to what's it going to be like for me to leave home and be on campus and be part of this community. That's absolutely the same as when I went to school, as when you went to school. So their interest in particular technologies and how they interact with their peers and how they interact with us, those things shift, but there are these fundamental human questions that they have about coming to college that really I don't think are changing and probably will never change as long as we have the residential college experience. So for admissions folks, helping technologists to kind of keep anchored in that way, because technology people are always looking at the next big thing and what's cool right now and what kids these days are up to. So it's important, I think, for us to stay grounded in the commonalities and the basic humanness of these students and the ways that they're not changing, because that really informs what we do as well.
Absolutely, and that really just speaks even more to that value of that relationship, because we depend on you just as much as you're depending on us for that information. We want to know that what we're saying out there is reflected in what we're putting out there in the web and vice versa. We don't want to have that conflict of providing that kind of information. So I hope a lot of people watching the show take that to heart and make sure that that relationship is strong and that they're giving the feedback to the folks working on their website so that you can keep that updated. But it is true. I mean, ultimately, we're looking for that sense of belonging, and and that we know that we can feel happy and safe and comfortable at this place for the next 3 years and can make a home here.
The academic stuff is important, and the financial aid stuff is obviously critically important, but the thing that I think really makes students lean one way or another is that whole experiential thing. Again, that's why if you get them onto campus, that's really a deciding factor. They can figure out, they can answer that question once they're on campus, once they're having experiences with other students, once they're walking around. They can answer those questions they have about what is it really going to be like to be here, and they can decide, this isn't for me, this is not my kind of place, or this is the best place in the world, this is the place I really need to be. Those are the stories that we hear from our admissions folks and from the new students who come in, as I came to campus, and that was the time, that was when I knew, that was the moment that I realized this was the place for me. And so if there's any way we can push that experience out a little bit earlier into their online exploration and convey some of that story so that they can begin to make that decision sooner, I think that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's huge. And I kind of reflecting on what you were mentioning earlier too about some of the things that the things that sort of resonated to most and the images that resonated to most, like up to the top. I noticed that you had pointed out that beyond the usual pages that we expect them to hit and information we expect them to seek, you saw a big focus on geography and community, which you talked about a little bit already. But geography, school size and composition, location, geographic context. And campus photos, as we already talked about. And so, do you have any suggestions for ways that we can make sure we're better expressing that as well too? I mean, obviously with campus photos, but I thought it was interesting that a student could look at a website and not immediately be able to figure out where the school was located, which we take for granted. But ways that we can improve that, I guess.
Well, I think the imagery again is really critical there. Mm-hmm. If we can find ways to use photos in creative ways. I've seen some schools that have done some really nice things with background photos on the pages that just those we feel, again, we feel like they're old and stodgy, but those pictures, the aerial photos of campus that show sort of how the campus sits and what the community around it looks like, those tell a lot of story to somebody who's trying to get that sense of what is this community like and what's the context. It can help them to understand, is this a rural setting, is this an urban setting, and again, we found that prospective students really pick up on that information really quickly, and they subconsciously absorb it. So even if it's not a primary element on your page, if you've got something there that can begin to suggest, images that suggest that this is an urban campus, or this is, we're out in the cornfields. Even if it's not if it's not a primary element, if there's things that can hint at that, I think that can begin to get you in the right direction towards conveying those kinds of messages. Because again, those are things that are really top of mind for students thinking about where they want to go to school. Is where is it, and how big is it? And again, I think it's that trying to understand what the experience of being there is going to be like, because they understand that being in a big city is going to be very different than being in a small town, and a small town near an urban area is very different than a small town that's 100 miles from anything. And so, we can't hide that stuff. I think sometimes there's a temptation to say, well, our schools have a lot of other merits, and they should be looking at us based on our academic quality and all of these other factors, and that's absolutely true. But again, this is basic human stuff. They care about the academic quality and all the rest of that, but they're not going to go to the best academic school in the world for them if it's in a place that they're not interested in being. And they'll look at a school that may not be a perfect match in other ways if it's in a place that's really exciting to them. So we can't hide this stuff. We need to put it out there and make it clear when they land on our homepage, when they land on our admissions page. Carleton College is a top flight academic school, and we're out on the prairie. It's where we are. There's going to be a lot of snow in the winter, and there's not a lot to see because there's a lot of prairie and trees. So but we can be honest about that, and they're students who that's what they're looking for. That's the kind of place that they love. So
Yeah, and I not only are they going to figure it out when they come to your campus anyway to make that realization, even if you're trying to hide it, but we live in a day and age too where, there's so many sites and so many places where they can hear the real story from our current students. So it does us no value whatsoever to try to hide these things. We need to kind of embrace not our flaws, but our school's personality, because what good does it do to hide it?
There are things that make us distinctive, and I think there's a tendency to hope that your school can be right for everybody, and we know that that's just not the case. You in admissions know this best of all because you talk to so many students, and you realize there's a lot of students out there who my school is just not right for, and so if we can recognize that early as we're thinking about how we're presenting things online, and not shy away from just being upfront about who we are and completely honest, and recognizing some of the things that we say are going to turn some people off, and that's okay because they're going to go someplace else that's a better fit for them. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
I think there's this. We've been. I think we've been warped a little bit by the whole emphasis on the number of applications that we get versus the number of people we admit, and trying to increase those application numbers as high as possible because that looks good on our ratings. But if we're just getting applications from people who really aren't good prospects anyway, is that good for us as institutions? So I understand the ratings game and how we've got to at some level we've got to play it, but I think we have to avoid the notion of applications at all costs, which means that we sometimes try to hide things that we think might turn people away.
Definitely. Well, and talking about the ratings game, I think that could be an entirely different show altogether. Yeah, but you make a really great point. Not every place is going to be the right fit for every person. I mean, Champlain College, where I work, it's its own personality, and I flat out tell students it is not the right fit for everybody, but for the right students, it's the perfect fit.
Right.
And that's what ultimately being in admissions is all about, and why this relationship we have with web is so important is that what we're saying and what you're saying, we want to make sure either way that you're not listening to me speak and then going to the page and going, is this the same school? And I think, I know I speak from my own experiences, and other counselors have said this as well, that sometimes you may hear other colleges that do kind of have that frame of mind of, applications at all cost, and almost are twisting things that they do and don't have to try to, entice students to come and to apply to their school. And it's not something that you would want to be successful in ultimately, because it's so much more valuable to bring in the students that are the right fit here, because then they will stay here because they're happy here. And so that's what we're trying to do with when I'm talking to students, and when you're building the site, that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve, is to say, hey, if you feel like you could be comfortable here, you should give us a look.
That's right. I feel sorry for you in admissions because you got to read all those applications. So.
We do. When you hear the, let's increase applications, yes, it's a great idea in theory, but it's a lot more pieces of paper to read, and a lot more, I dream of applications all through the winter, so. And I know I can't be the only admission counselor who has that experience. So, yeah, I'd rather read slightly fewer but really great fitting student applications. So it's all the more reason stories that we're telling are authentic and real, and things that students can see that I fit here. I can see my space here. I really appreciate the fact, and I know you mentioned this before you even started this show, but really thinking about this big picture it really helps to kind of whittle down those individual details, I think, because whether you're in the admission side or the website, if you think about, well, what is our goal, and it's to bring in these students that are right fit, well, how do we do that? We actually tell them what it's like here.
Right. We give them the tools that they need to draw the right conclusions about what it would be like to become part of our community.
Absolutely.
That's the key.
Yes. Well, and we've flown through all my questions, so I do just want to kind of leave it at, and maybe this is a little bit of reiteration of a lot of what we were saying, but overall, from your research, from what you learned about the way that students are, learning from the web and the way that their brain works, what do you find to be the most important details for admission counselors to take away as, the front lines, as you called us? What are the most important things for us to keep in mind based off of what you learned about students and the way they learn this information?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to that what we were talking about when you're out in the field and you're working with students and sitting and looking at the website, to be thinking about, from their perspective, what is it that they're seeing when they're looking at these pages? And really practicing that empathy of placing yourselves in their shoes, which can be difficult because they're not cognitively quite the same as you are. They're not seeing things in the same way that you are. They're not able to draw the same kinds of conclusions, which means you kind of have to simplify way down. And I'm always hesitant to say this because I'm not saying that these kids are dumb. They're really smart. But their brains don't work quite in the same way that ours do as adults, and they're not able to put things together in quite the same way. So we need, I think admissions folks need to be looking at the content that's out there, both on admission sites and on home pages, and saying, is this clearly articulating our core messages? Is it clearly articulating our values and the nature of our institution and where we are and what we're all about? And is it giving those messages in a really obvious way? Is it not hiding it behind lots of different pieces that you have to assemble to get at the picture and kind of play these intellectual games to figure out what it is we're trying to say? And that was our real big takeaway out of our research. And if you go and look at the Carleton.edu homepage, you'll see what we've got there. When you land on that page, there's some big pictures. They're not all as widely cropped as we'd hoped because it's really hard to shoot those photos well, but there are extraordinarily clear messages in very few words about exactly what it is we want the prospective students to know. We're not making them do any work to get those messages. And so if you look at your homepage, if you look at your admissions page and there's stuff there that isn't completely obvious, if there's stuff there that somebody could look at and say, I don't understand what this is about, or this makes the school look needy, or this allows me to draw conclusions. You could imagine somebody coming to a conclusion that's not correct based on that information and that information alone. Then you need to go to your web folks and say, we got to fix this. There's something here that's not clear enough. There's something here that's misleading. Let's rethink it and make it more obvious. And just because we're focusing on prospective students in that kind of a task doesn't mean that it's not also benefiting the other audiences that we have for a homepage, our alumni and our parents and our current students and everybody else, because everybody benefits from pages that are very clear about their messages, very clear about the images that they're using, very succinct in how they express things. It's a benefit for everybody. So it's not a question of dumbing it down for this one audience. It's a question of just making it clear for everybody, making it unambiguous about who the audience for each piece of information is, and making sure that they can't misinterpret any of that.
Absolutely. Well, and I actually was just reminded of one other quote that was from your presentation where, I'm not going to say it word for word correctly, but essentially you're saying, why are we expecting to do these critical thinking tasks when we want to teach them about critical thinking?
We're really good at teaching these kind of critical thinking tasks and this assembling information and drawing conclusions from ambiguous stuff, but because we're so attuned to that kind of academic thinking, it seeps into our web design, and it's not a good thing because it makes it really hard for this audience to interpret.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a wonderful kind of suggestion and thought to be able to end this with. And thank you so much, Mark, for sharing a little bit of insight into your presentation. And I'll share the link on the hashtag, the HighEdLive hashtag, so everybody can check out your presentation. And I think you encourage everybody to look at it on Chrome, right?
Well, if you want to look at the presentation, the slides will actually work on Chrome. They're funny on other things because it's a completely it's kind of a cutting edge, bleeding edge presentation technology that I kind of had to hack together some pieces to make it work. I love to play around with this stuff. But I also just on last week gave the same presentation to an audience at the University of Minnesota World Usability Day event, and I was just told that that's been posted online. So I think if you just Google University of Minnesota World Usability, you can probably find that link, and you can actually see the whole presentation with me talking and the slides. So that's the best way to experience it. But
Excellent.
you can go read the script on my website too.
Excellent. I had forgotten already that you had said that that was out there on video, so I will make sure to
I'll
check
email you
that
that link too.
Perfect, and I'll make sure to share it with the audience because I really do think that anybody can gain a lot of great ideas and understanding about the way the students think about the web and about admissions and everything else in between. So thank you again so much, Mark, and congratulations on winning the red stapler, by the way.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, as always, to our program sponsors, M. Stoner, Abilene Christian University. Welcome to college. Coming up next on Higher Ed Live tomorrow, host Ryan Catherwood speaks with Matt DeWald of the University of Richmond and Dale Krieger of Johns Hopkins about exploring the alumni magazine. Get reminders about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Browse the archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the Higher Ed Live podcast on iTunes. I'm Nicole Lentine, back next month with more Admissions Live. Thank you, everybody.